Hello, my name is Troy. Welcome to the runoble.com webpage, runoble.com YouTube channel, and also a Facebook page entitled Noble Grafted in Middle Position, where we're trying to teach people that it's best to bring the context that we are learning about in the New Testament from the Bible that this is the King Jesus version of the Bible. The Hebrew Bible, our Old Testament. We see in Matthew 24:15 where Jesus told us to read, pay attention to that which was written by the prophet Daniel. 2 Peter chapter 2 verses 1 and 3. We see where, excuse me, 2 Peter chapter 3, 1 and 2, where Peter said, I want to refresh your memory that which was written by the Hebrew prophets. And of course, Paul in Acts 17:11 commended those who were more noble because they listened eagerly, but they examined the scriptures to see if what he was saying was true. The only scriptures that existed at the time was the King Jesus version, the Hebrew Bible. So today we're going to study, this is kind of part 2 in something new, something old, something borrowed, something true, referring to the marriage supper of the Lamb. When we went last time, we studied the marriage supper of the Lamb in the context of Revelation 20, the time of Jacob's trouble. Today we're hitting in the same area. We're gonna try to end up at Revelation 19, the great supper of God, the great recompense of God, where He literally wipes out the militaries that are on their way to take out His chosen nation, Israel. And so in order to do that, we're going to center where last study was centered on Revelation 20. Today's study will be Revelation 19. And they kind of go together. One last time was talking about the time of Jacob's trouble, where Israel will have one final punishment, Ezekiel 35. And today, after that, there's going to be recompense against the nations who chose to go against Israel. And that's called the Great Supper of God. Now, those that have been forgiven, redeemed, that are in Christ are predestined to receive glorified bodies, and they have a date with Christ at the marriage supper of the Lamb, of which I hope you're looking forward to and following Jesus by really eagerly waiting for His return, obeying His objective truths, and putting others first, washing feet, walking through this life humbly. And to be a good servant of the Lord, you also must receive a love of the truth, that you might be saved. So when we get to Luke 14, there's a banquet. Jesus sends His servants out to be invited to this banquet. They all begin making excuses. I've bought a field. I have a cow. I just got married. The master becomes angry. He says, go out into the streets quickly, bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, the lame. This is the transition that is happening, is that God's people are rejecting Him, and therefore God is going to use this to make an example. He's going to take the gospel, the kingdom, the inheritance, and shift it over to the Gentiles, or anybody that would listen and come to the marriage supper of the Lamb. So that's what's going on here. But He's angry at His own people because the majority of them rejected Him. So He says, go out into the highways, the hedges, compel the people to come in. And that's what we want to do, is compel people. We want to urge people. You have a free will. You can make that choice. It is not a work of the law by the flesh to accept an invitation that's given to you as a gift. So, but He does say the people that were at the time, Jesus said, I tell you, none of these men who were invited shall taste my banquet. So there's a complete and utter rejection of the leadership of Israel. But there's a time of their final punishment that's coming, described in Ezekiel 35 through 39, called the time of Jacob's trouble. Today, the supper of God, today's simple truth, there is only one great supper of God, not two, as we are taught by those who think Jesus is coming back twice. We went over that in part 1. Jesus is only coming back once. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. God knows how to rescue the righteous while judging the wicked right up into the day of judgment. There's no 7-year gap. There's only one second coming, and there is only one great supper of God. So today, for something old, something new, something borrowed, something true, we're going to continue where we were in part 1, where we connected Jeremiah 30 verse 7, Daniel 12, 1 and 4, Matthew 24, 15 to 19, and went to 20. We're going to do kind of the same thing today. We're going to start in Deuteronomy 32. We're going to have a prequel. We're going to study Deuteronomy 32, the Song of Moses, specifically verse 41, which is the great supper of God, spelled out by God in the Song of Moses, written as a testament against Israel. It is so important to understand the Song of Moses. It shows up again in Revelation 15 prior to the bowl judgments. It's talking about the great wine press, the blood of the armies, the nations that come against Israel, Armageddon. It's kind of first called out in Deuteronomy 32:41. If you know the linear nature of Deuteronomy 32, you'll understand so much more of the Bible. So we'll go from Deuteronomy 32 to Ezekiel 39, specifically verses 17 and to 20, and we'll connect those to Revelation 19, 11 to 21. Now, there's a great debate. Some people think that the Antichrist is coming from Europe, specifically the country of Romania. The Tim LaHaye series even called out their leader, Nicolae Carpathian. That's Nicolae Ceausescu, and then also the Carpathian Mountains. It was the fictitious character in the fiction book that he wrote. So I was a church planter for 12 years over in Eastern Europe and spent a great deal of time in Eastern Romania, in the city of Glatz. So I kind of know a little bit about this. And honestly, the entire time I was there, I did believe the Antichrist was coming from Europe until I had a major, like an epiphany that I needed to start using the Old Testament to determine the context of the New Testament and not vice versa. So now I do believe the Antichrist has come from those nations that surround Israel, specifically to the north, the Assyrian, which could be Turkey. That's the name. Noble, grafted in, middle position is not only the middle between the covenant and dispensational positions, but the middle in terms of eschatology. The latter days points us directly to what we're seeing right now in the Middle East. So something old. How does understanding the Song of Moses help us to understand the New Testament, the return of Christ? Well, first of all, you have to go to the Song of Moses, Deuteronomy 32 worldview, Song of Moses, something that all Israelites would have known, something that Paul would have memorized. And so therefore we need to know a little bit about it. So this is the prequel to Deuteronomy 32, Song of Moses, which gets us to the great supper of God in verse 41. But let's see the context, Deuteronomy 31, 16 to 22. And the Lord said to Moses, behold, you are about to lie down with your fathers. Then this people will rise and whore after foreign gods among them in the land that they are entering. And they will forsake me and break my covenant that I have made with them. Then my anger will be kindled against them in that day. So this is what God is telling Moses before they enter the promised land about what Israel will do in the future. And he says, matter of fact, I want you to write a song about it. Top 40. So here we go. Then my anger will be kindled against them in that day. I will forsake them and hide my face from them. This is a key phrase, hide my face from them. So when God gets angry with them, when they turn from God and turn back into idolatry and move back in under the foreign gods, plural, the gods of this world, the demonic influences, God's going to hide his face from them. This is a key theme. It's so important. It's a bookend in this lesson itself. It could be bookend with I will hide my face from them to I will hide my face from them no longer. So then my anger will be kindled against them in that day. I will forsake them and hide my face from them, and they will be devoured. And many evils and troubles will come upon them, so that they will say in that day, have not these evils come upon us because our God is not among us? And I will surely hide my face in that day because of all the evil that they had done. So it's not because of a decree before time. It's not because of meticulous determination. It's because of all the evil they did in return to the favor God did them by delivering out of Egypt. So he says, put this in their mouths. No, he says, now therefore write this song and teach it to the people of Israel. Put it in their mouths, that this song may be a witness for me against the people of Israel. So this is the context for Deuteronomy 32, which is the context for the book of Romans, believe it or not, and the context for the great supper of God and the deliverance of Israel in the future. So, verse 20 of chapter 31 of Deuteronomy. For when I have brought them into the land flowing with milk and honey, which I swore to give to their fathers. So this land, which was sworn to them from the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, all three of them, you can see in 1 Chronicles 16, it talks about a covenant given to Abraham, a promise made to Isaac, and a statute given to Jacob before his name is switched to Israel. So it's going to be Abraham, not Ishmael, Jacob, not Esau, who inherits the land and is true heirs to that inheritance. So, I swore to give it to their fathers, and they have eaten and are full and have grown fat. They will turn to other gods. In the Bible, in the Hebrew mind, Elohim simply means someone who resides in the unseen realm. Now, we have the Most High God, but you have to understand that there are divine beings that are invisible, powers and principalities that are like cosmically locked to the peoples of this planet, where the Most High God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is the God that we serve and worship and are connected to by being grafted into the God of Commonwealth of Israel. So they will turn to other gods and serve them and despise me and break my covenant. And many of evils and troubles have come upon them. This song shall confront them as a witness, for it will live unforgotten in the mouths of their offspring. Now, Deuteronomy 7 is also a prequel to Deuteronomy 32. For you are a people holy to the Lord. So this is the concept of being chosen, the concept of being elect, the concept of a corporate election, the nation of Israel, which not all will be Israel because they don't truly believe. They don't truly follow Christ. They don't have the faith that would make them be declared righteous apart from works of the law. That's Hebrews 11. So we have an election of a nation, a corporate election of a nation. And if you are part of this nation, you are not a Gentile. You are not Goyim. You are part of God's inheritance, his chosen, allotted inheritance, the apple of his eye. So once again, Deuteronomy 7, 6-10. For you are a holy people to the Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for his treasured possession, his treasured possession out of all the peoples who are on the face of the earth. So out of all the peoples, out of the face of the earth, the world, God so loved the world, but out of all these peoples, he's chosen a people for himself. And it's interesting that this has happened after he disinherited the nations at the Tower of Babel as they rebelled against him. But so God has chosen you to be a people for his treasured possession out of all the peoples who are on the face of the earth. It was not because you were more in number than any other people that the Lord has set his love and chose you, plural. For you were the fewest of all peoples. But it is because the Lord loves you and is keeping the oath that he swore to your fathers. This is where Paul gets in Romans 11, the calling of God is irrevocable. Israel is a beloved race, even though they're elect enemies of the gospel that was allowing the Gentiles to come in freely because Jesus died on the cross and broke down the wall of hostility. For the Lord has brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you from the house of slavery, from the hand of the Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Know therefore that the Lord your God is God, the faithful God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments. to 1,000 generations, and repays to their face those who hate him by destroying them. So this is sort of a Genesis 12. I'll bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you. I'll make your name great. And we see the word recompense in the last 10 verses of the entire Bible, Revelation. And at the very, very, very end of the Bible, we see where God is spelling out this recompense. And he even kind of taunts mankind. He says, hey, you want to keep doing evil? Do evil. You want to do good? Do good, because my recompense is coming. He will not be slack with the one who hates him. He will repay him to his face. Now, Deuteronomy 4, therefore, this is still part of the prequel to Deuteronomy 32, which is also the book of Romans, but we're in the something old, something new, something borrowed, something true. We're in the something old part, learning the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, so we know what the context is when we get into the New Testament. Therefore, watch yourselves very carefully, since you saw no one on that day that the Lord spoke to you at Horeb out of the midst of the fire. Beware lest you act corruptly by making a carved image for yourselves in the form of any figure, male, female, animal, winged bird, fish. And beware lest you raise your eyes to heaven. When you see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the hosts of heaven, these are kind of symbolic of the divine council, those people who rule in the invisible state, part of the divine council up under the only true God, the ultimate and most powerful and almighty Elohim, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the creator God. In Romania, it was Atoputernic. It was all powerful. The Almighty. Things that the Lord your God has allotted to the peoples under the whole earth. Okay, so he's allotted those things. He's disinherited the gods, the hosts of heaven, the sons of God. The divine council has been scattered at the Tower of Babel event and dispersed cosmic geography, the god of Persia, the god of Babylon, the powers and principalities that rule over this earth under the God of this earth, little g. But God has kept Israel for himself. But the Lord, this is verse 20 of Deuteronomy chapter 4, but the Lord has taken you and brought you out of the iron furnace, out of Egypt, to be a people of his own inheritance. So now we're going to start in the Song of Moses, Deuteronomy 32 worldview. Going to go through it rather quick because I'm trying to actually get past this, but you need to understand Deuteronomy 32 to even get this. So you can read, you could stop the tape, you could listen to it, but you need to read Deuteronomy 32 several times. It's kind of an outline. Verses 1 to 4, it's talking about Jesus. Refers to him as the rock, capital R. His work is perfect. Paul mentions this again in 1 Corinthians 10. The result is in verses 5 and 6, they have dealt corruptly with him, just like he said it to Moses up on the hill in Deuteronomy 31. Write this song because they are a crooked and twisted generation. 7 to 14 of chapter 32 of Deuteronomy. Remember the days of old when the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind. That's the Tower of Babel. Divided mankind according to the sons of God, which you would need to do a study of Psalm 82 and Psalm 89 and Job 1 and Daniel 7, even Genesis 1. To understand what that's talking about, the sons of God, which is translated correctly. In some of your versions, it says the sons of Israel, which is funny because at the Tower of Babel, Israel did not even exist. God disinherited all the nations of the world. There was no Israel in the table of nations, Genesis 10. That's why Genesis 11 is the Tower of Babel event when the nations were divided. The cosmic geography, they're scattered. The gods are scattered. In Psalm 82, we learn they'll die like men. They were guilty of not serving the Most High God correctly. And then in Genesis 12, lo and behold, we have God calling one man out of the Ur of Chaldees. And we have later God calling one nation out of Egypt. And later we have God calling all people out of the kingdom of darkness. So remember that. But this is verses 7 to 14, very, very powerful verses, Deuteronomy 32. It talks all about God choosing Israel, keeping Jacob as his allotted heritage. That's why we went back to Deuteronomy 4 and Deuteronomy 7 to help you see he will hate those who hate his elected people and bless those who bless his elected people. It's Israel. Not all people who are elect are saved. All people who are elect are part of Israel. And some of Israel is not even really Israel because they don't believe. They don't follow Christ. They're idolaters. So not all who actually are physically tied to Abraham genetically are going to be declared righteous because they don't have saving faith. They're trying to earn it through works of the law, at least at that time. Now, verses 15 to 21 is where we see Paul referring to Deuteronomy 32 and 1 Corinthians 10, 21 and 22. They sacrifice to demons. You should read 1 Corinthians 10 and compare it to Deuteronomy 32, the Song of Moses. They sacrifice to demons. The demons is the word Elohim. Elohim. So it's just those who reside in the unseen realm, disembodied spirits. There's Elohim are just those that are not seen. We wrestle not with flesh and blood, but with powers and principalities, Paul says. They forgot that God gave them birth. They made him jealous. So in Deuteronomy 32, 15 to 21, we see where they sacrifice to demons. They go back outside of their parameters and make God jealous. So he says, they made him jealous. I will hide my face from them. And that's a chain you could study in Isaiah 8:16, Isaiah 30, 15 to 20, Ezekiel 39, 24 to 29, for they are a perverse generation. Now, we will get back into this a little bit later, but right here in the book of Romans is where Paul breaks in, because he is the apostle to the Gentiles. So Paul, it took him nearly 20 years, but as he gets knocked off his horse, he's blinded, saved, given a special ministry to go open the eyes of the Gentiles, turn them from Satan to God. He's trying to find in this Deuteronomy 32 what's going on, and he realizes God is going to the Gentiles in order to make his own people jealous according to the Song of Moses. So he thinks, wow, this is right where the death of Jesus should fit in. This is right when God sends the message of the kingdom to the Gentiles, to whom he was supposed to destroy in the day of the Lord's wrath. Instead, because of Israel's disobedience, he shows mercy to us Gentiles, which we're to give him glory for. Now, this is where Paul inserts 3 key verses into the Song of Moses when he's writing the book of Romans. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Those 3 verses deal with the wrath of God. The wrath of God. Intercepted by Jesus on the cross for all people, because all people have sinned. The Lord put the iniquity of us all on Jesus. And he says, because Jesus took our punishment, the wrath upon himself, anyone who calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved, because Jesus brought down the wall of hostility. Ephesians 2:12 through the end of that chapter, we see that there's no longer a separation between Jew and Gentile. There's no longer a wall of hostility. And so Paul inserts Isaiah 28:16, Joel 2:32, and Isaiah 53 right here. A tested stone, Romans 10:11. Romans 10:13, anyone who calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. Romans 10:13, not all have believed. They all have gone astray. Jesus died for the iniquity of us all. There is no limited atonement in Isaiah 53. And then in Deuteronomy 32:21, so now we're back into the Old Testament. What we just talked about is where the New Testament is inserting a truth because of Jesus into the Song of Moses. The transition is right there. Just like in the invitation to the wedding supper, where he's angry because people were getting married, buying oxen. They didn't have time to go to the wedding supper that was prepared and ready. So he said, okay, just go to the highways, just go to the hedges, invite good, bad, ugly, just bring them in. I want the banquet full. Just urge them to come in and accept the invitation to the inheritance, the wedding supper of the Lamb, which is not a work of the flesh to accept an invitation as a gift. So when we get down to Deuteronomy 32:21, we see Paul bringing this up in the book of Romans. Did the people of Israel really understand Romans 10:19? Yes, they did. I will rouse your jealousy through a people who are not a nation. Romans 11:11. Did God's people stumble and fall beyond recovery? Of course not. But he wanted his own people to become jealous and claim it for themselves. So can you see where Paul takes the Song of Moses, inserts the death of Christ, the wrath of God intercepted, propitiation for us, transitions to Joel, where the wrath of God comes on the Gentiles. It says, anyone who calls upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. So now we have, in verses 23 to 26, God wants to cut them to pieces. I will repay them to their face. In verse 27, had I not feared provocation of the enemy, lest their adversaries should misunderstand, lest they should say, our hand is triumphant. It was not the Lord at all who did this. So we have the divine cosmic geography. God's trying to keep his promise, will keep his promise, because he's all powerful, to deliver the land to a group of people genetically tied to Abraham in the future, national redemption of Israel, that are almost crushed. And when he sees their power is gone, he's going to deliver them. He's going to return, pour out recompense on the militaries around the nation of Israel. But he actually wants to wipe out Israel. He actually would like to take them out. But he doesn't want the enemy to take credit for it. That's the only reason they still exist, is because God, the Most High God, doesn't want the other gods taking credit for wiping out Israel, even though he will let them come close. So verse 28 and 30 of Deuteronomy 32, Song of Moses. A nation void of counsel, they do not discern their latter end. How could they be in trouble if their rock, capital R, hadn't sold them and given them up? Comparing verse 31 to 34 is comparing so-called gods against their God. Our rock, the Most High God, the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac and Jacob. And he talks about the vine from Sodom, fields from Gomorrah, grapes of poison. The wine is poison serpents, cruel venom, asps. He's not happy with his people. Verse 35, vengeance is mine and recompense. The day of their calamity is at hand, for the time when their foot shall slip. Their doom comes swiftly. So this is where Paul goes to Romans 12:19. Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. So that takes us really back to Genesis 12 and Deuteronomy 7, where I'll bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. Those who hate me, I will repay them to their face. And that's the time of Jacob's trouble in a way. So here's the great supper of God, which we're trying to learn today. It's in verses 36 to 41. For the Lord will indicate his people and have compassion on his servants when he sees their power is gone, the time of Jacob's trouble, and there is nothing remaining, bond or free. Then he will say, where are their gods? Where are those people you were depending on? How's that working out for you now? He will vindicate his people. I will take vengeance on my enemies. See, none of this makes sense if you don't have the cosmic geography, the battle between the heavens and the earth, the unseen and the seen, those gods who are lower gods, the Elohim that rule the planet with the God of this world, cosmic geography, with the people that are chosen after the disinherited event on the Tower of Babel. He plucks one man, one nation, and then all people who want to follow his son Jesus Christ. All those people will be redeemed, but at the same time, God would just as soon Israel was wiped out, but he can't let it happen because it would not be keeping his promise. The calling of God is irrevocable to the patriarchs, and they're a beloved nation. God loves them. That's what Romans 8:28 is all about. So here he says, He will vindicate his people. I will take vengeance on my enemies and repay those who hate me. Verse 41 is the great supper of God. I will make my arrow drunk with blood, and my sword will devour flesh, and the blood of the slain and the captives. Boom. So in Revelation 22, 11 to 21, it talks about I'm bringing my recompense. This is the great supper of God. In Revelation 19, this is it. This is what follows part 1 we went over last week, Jeremiah 30, verse 7, the time of Jacob's trouble. When he sees their power is gone, he's going to go, hey, where's your gods now? That's the time of Jacob's trouble. That's Daniel 12, 1 through 4. That's Matthew 24, 15 through 19. That's the time of the great tribulation. Satan's wrath, where God allows, removes the restrainer. God's people are almost crushed by these surrounding nations. Armageddon happens. Jesus, the Messiah, returns, which what appears to be kind of tying Deuteronomy 33 with the second Exodus. It appears that Jesus returns right at Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia, by Mecca, by Medina, marches up through Edom on his way back to Mount Zion to establish his kingdom here on earth. Fascinating stuff. So, verse 43, rejoice with him, O heavens, and bow down to him, all gods, nations. Come celebrate with God's people. That's how Paul ends up the book of Romans in 15, verse 10. He quotes Deuteronomy 32, verse 43. It's kind of interesting. So, when Paul is talking, and he knows Deuteronomy 32 is split in half by the death of Jesus, where he brings in Isaiah and Joel, the wrath. And anyone who calls upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Anyone who believes in his heart and confesses with his mouth, believes in his heart that God raised him from the dead, and with his mouth that Jesus is Lord, shall be saved from the Lord, from the God's wrath. So you can see we're just simply repeating a prayer. It has nothing to do with it. You have to believe in your heart, and it has to become a life-changing event. You're turning from evil, from the powers of darkness, from Satan to righteousness, to Christ, to obedience, to the point of death. So now let's think about this. When Paul writes at the end of so you can see he's taken Deuteronomy 32 and he's interjecting the death of Christ and bringing the Gentiles into that picture. It's amazing. He doesn't when Paul writes Romans 15, he doesn't sound like a covenant theologian who says the church has replaced Israel, because he was not teaching that the church replaced Israel. Why would he say that Gentiles were no longer strangers to the covenants of promise if he actually was trying to say that God was finished with those same covenants of promise? Why would Paul say God came to the circumcised to confirm the promises made to the patriarchs in Romans 15:8? Why don't the covenant theologians teach that way? The confirm the promises made to the patriarchs in order that the Gentiles the uncircumcised would give God glory for his mercy, not his sovereignty. It's his mercy that we're to give God glory for. The whole book of Romans is about mercy. Romans is about mercy, not fixed decrees. Mercy's flexible. Because of Israel's disobedience, the Gentiles received mercy, not wrath. We're to give God glory for that. But since we don't really understand the Old Testament, and we're taught that there's some decree before time that fixes everything through meticulous determination, and that there's really Jacob means an individual and Esau means an individual before time we're sent to heaven or hell, then we miss the whole dynamics of the book of Romans. Every bit of it. The Reformers missed it so bad. They almost got nothing right, literally, when it comes to the plan of redemption for the nation of Israel and what Romans 8 through 11 and through 15 is really talking about, which is paralleling Deuteronomy 32, they almost got nothing right. It's incredible how far they missed that which Paul was trying to convey to the Gentiles. And even Paul warned in Romans 11:29, he said, hey, you're just wild olive branches being grafted in among the natural branches. Do not become haughty. Do not become arrogant. Your arrogance will lead to your ignorance. Or actually, it's the other way around. Your ignorance will lead to your arrogance. And we are there. We need to start to regroup as a church body, as a body of believers in this time and age. We need to set Augustine aside, Calvin aside, Luther aside, those who hated the concept of God choosing and electing a nation for himself amongst the gods of this earth, taking them all the way to the end and delivering them at the recompense of God, those nations who come against Israel. It's time to wake up. And notice he doesn't sound like a dispensationalist either, where church is distinct from Israel, because Paul says we're no longer separated, Gentiles are no longer separated from the commonwealth of Israel. He had just taught in Romans 11 that, we're grafted in. So what are his instructions in Romans 15:8? Here's what they are. For I tell you that Christ became a servant to the circumcised to show God's truthfulness in order to confirm the promises given to the patriarchs. Confirm, not fulfill. Verse 8 of chapter 15 of Romans, which is paralleling Deuteronomy 32, Song of Moses, written as a testimony against Israel, which would have been very convenient for Paul, who was trying to explain where the leaders of Israel went wrong crucifying Jesus. It would have been a very convenient song to use against Israel in the time of Paul, because God had Moses write it against Israel in the time of the Exodus. So, for I tell you that Christ became a servant to the circumcised to show God's truthfulness in order to confirm the promises given to the patriarchs, and in order that the Gentiles might glorify God for his mercy. Now remember, this is supposed to sound like either a covenant theologian or a dispensational theologian. This is Paul giving us instructions what the Gentiles and the Jews, being one, united in one body, one new body, are supposed to be sounding like. We're supposed to sound this way. Okay? So this is Paul's conclusion in the book of Romans based on what he knows to be true from Deuteronomy 32. For I tell you that the Christ became a servant to the circumcised to show God's truthfulness in order to confirm, not fulfill, confirm the promises given to the patriarchs, and in order that the Gentiles might glorify God for his mercy. As it is written, therefore I will praise you among the Gentiles. As it is written, I will praise you amongst the Gentiles. For sing to your name. And again it is said, rejoice, O Gentiles, with his people. And again, praise the Lord, all you Gentiles, and let all the peoples extol him. And again, Isaiah says, the root of Jesse will come, even he who arises to rule the Gentiles. In him will the Gentiles hope. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit you may abound in hope. 2 Samuel 22:50. I will praise you among the nations. Psalm 18:49. I will praise you among the nations. Speaking about Gentiles from the Old Testament. Are you noble? Paul was. These are all his quotes in Romans 15. 2 Samuel 22:50, Psalm 18:49, Deuteronomy 32, last verse, Song of Moses 43. Gentiles, rejoice with him, O heavens, bow down to him, all gods. But he keeps going. Psalm 117:1. Gentiles, extol him with all peoples. Great is his love. Isaiah 10, Isaiah 11. So Paul quotes the Old Testament 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. All the time, knowing Micah 6:2 says, hear you mountains, the indictment of the Lord, for you enduring foundations of the earth. For the Lord has an indictment against his people, and he will contend with Israel. So what I'm going to do right now is we're going to go into this great supper of God. I'm going to do a part 3 where we tie the great supper of God, Ezekiel 39, to Revelation. Well, we're going to go to the New Testament and look at that a little bit, and then go to Revelation chapter 20 and compare. The whole thing I wanted you to learn today was that Ezekiel 39 is Revelation 19, and that Ezekiel 39 is talking about the Islamic nations that surround Israel, as is Revelation 19. But what we're being told is, because there's a 7-year gap, that Ezekiel 39 is different than Revelation 19. They're 10 years apart. This creates so many problems you can't imagine it. So maybe before the next video, you'd have time to read Ezekiel 35, 36, 37, 38, 39. Read it, and then also Revelation 19. And see if you can kind of start to see that they're the same thing, that there's one Antichrist. The Antichrist is going to be Islamic. He's going to come from Assyria. He's going to come from Turkey and that area north of Israel. And that there is every reason to have our eyes wide open right now, globally speaking, so that Jesus doesn't return to us like a thief in the night. So God bless you. Hope you enjoy this. Remember, be noble, be blessed. God bless you.